Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to NOLA Theater Talk. My name is Alan Smason, and once again, it's my pleasure to be with you on Mondays and Friday nights. This is part of the NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group that we have. Again, that was created specifically for the New Orleans theater community, and it is a broadcast there as well as to the theatercriticism.com Facebook page and to my own Musiclovers 169. That's the YouTube channel that I have as well. You just look up Alan Smason, you'll find it there. Tonight we have a very timely and yet a very, I think, pertinent discussion. We've all been dealing with the last several months of protest with Black Lives Matter. And tonight we're going to discuss what essentially is another aspect of inclusion and diversity that we've probably not discussed too much, and generally gets relegated to an inclusion with Black Lives Matter from time to time. But it is, to my way of thinking, a bit more of a separate entity, and one that should be addressed not necessarily as a carry along with the Black Lives Matters movement. It should be addressed as a separate entity and in and of itself, something that should be talked about. So tonight we're going to talk about Hispanic inclusion. We're going to talk about the proper terms, which I'm going to learn about myself, I hope, as to how to address it. And the person I'm going to bring in first tonight is somebody who is known as a performance artist. He's, I'm sure he'd like to be called a radical activist. He deals with all sorts of issues pertaining to the Latin community and where they're disenfranchised. He strives to right the rights and tries to make things correct, and that people who are disenfranchised within his community, that they're restored to their rights, etc. So I'm going to bring in Jose Torres-Tama. Again, I want to thank you for being with us tonight. Jose, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
I don't know whether or not that's a proper term, because I know you are a performance artist, but you're much more than that. And again, much of the theater that you bring to the fore, is subject to not necessarily controversy, but subject to introspection, to thinking about where we are, where we should be, etc. And I find that much of what you have to say is pertinent to a discussion that we're dealing with tonight. And again, I want to thank you for being here. First off, Jose, you are from where originally?
I was born in Ecuador, in Guayaquil City, which is really having one of the worst COVID crises you could imagine, literally with bodies laid out on the street, cardboard boxes. Our place like Guayaquil City doesn't have that health infrastructure, so it's been really tragic. And I was raised in New York. And my early work on the stage there was presented at Performance Space 122 and the Nuyorican Poets Cafe and the Lower East Side Theater, and also a number of other places there.
So what got you to New Orleans?
I actually opened up a book. I was tired of the Northeast during my college days. Shortly thereafter, I wanted to get away from the Northeast. I wanted to get away from the cold. I opened up a book. My mother had purchased an encyclopedia for me, and I was very studious and scholarly. And I just opened up this whole section of there were these white books that had different sections on different parts of the world, and one of them was dedicated to the USA South. And it opened up literally to New Orleans, to the corner of Royal Street, where the old, not where the AMP was, but remember it was the AMP that was there, the corner of Royal Street and St. Peter. I saw the architecture, and I was actually an architecture student early on, and I fell in love with it right away because I could see the Spanish and the Spanish influences.
That's where the wrought iron is there, right? The wrought iron work, etc.
Right there. And let's make sure we understand that it's the Spanish Quarter, not the French Quarter.
Correct. Well, I understand that, but again, most people don't know that, because much of what was the quote-unquote French Quarter burned down. That's before right. The Spanish took it over. 1762 was when they actually ceded the property, but they didn't actually arrive here till 1764.
Well, the Spanish put up the flag right at, I thought it was 1763 when they put up the flag.
Maybe they did put up the flag, but I mean the administration, as far as I remember reading about it, didn't actually start. I know that because once they arrived, they threw my people out.
Oh, the Spanish were brutal, as you know. Yeah. So were the French.
And of course, I'm referring to the Jewish population that was here. Very small group, and there was already in Code Noir which existed to prevent Jewish people from being here in the New World, but it was never enforced because the Jews served necessary purposes in terms of industry and in terms of matters of commerce and things of that sort. So they did a lot of the work that other people weren't doing. And again, that may be, in a sense, a part of what was going to lead us to our discussion about the number of people who came here to help restore New Orleans after Katrina, who were doing the work that nobody else wanted to do.
Absolutely. And I would say that the term for me, so I gravitated to New Orleans and I found it to be absolutely Caribbean. I was so impressed by the culture. And come on, you guys are eating red beans and rice. I grew up with red beans and rice. I was like, oh my goodness, wow, I love this city immediately. And I saw those placards and I began doing research. And I got here in 1984, January 11th of 1984. I've been here since. And there was a time when I was going back and forth. I was living in New York and living in New Orleans. I was bi-coastal at the time, doing theater work there and doing theater here. So for me, the term that best suits me is Latino. I don't gravitate to Hispanic. Hispanic was actually created by the Nixon administration to try to codify a growing Latin people. Hispanic really leads more to the Hispaniola, and people like me are Latin Americans. Let's make sure that we understand that the Spanish who left from Palo Alto, we have much more in common with southern Spain than we do with the northern seat of Spain, because it was the Spanish ships, La Pinta, La Nina, La Santa Maria, that left from Palo Alto to arrive and begin the genocide, right?
And let's not forget they were captained by an Italian.
That's right.
All right.
Because Columbus couldn't get his own Italian people to believe that he could sail across and get to India, believing, because there was still the belief system that he was going to fall off the edge. So he couldn't get their support. So he approached Queen Isabella, and Queen Isabella gave him the discovery doctrine and the flag. So wherever he went, he set the flag down of the Spanish crown, in addition with the discovery doctrine, that those people became subjects of the Spanish Empire.
And he managed to miss America completely. He managed to get the Caribbean, but I guess it's all in the PR. So I'm going to ask first off what you're having tonight. I know what I'm having.
Here we go. Cheers to you. I love this tradition of yours. I am having a coconut tequila cocktail.
And I am carrying the tequila theme forward because I am having, it looks all right, huh? A tequila sunrise.
Look at you, tequila sunrise. Mine is as fancy as yours. All right, cheers, touche. Salud.
Salud. So again, I want to make sure that I'm using terms properly now, because I'm very cognizant of what goes on when you're in company. When we're in the theater, became aware that the term African American is not exactly a proper term for people from the Caribbean necessarily. Don't necessarily believe that they're African American, although some do. Some also in England would not say African American. Obviously, it doesn't apply to them. So the term black would be more appropriate. But again, these things change. When we talked about back in the days of W. Du Bois, it was W.B. Du Bois. It was like he was actively campaigning for a capital N for the word Negro, which was the popular term at that time. Of course, that's fallen out of fashion. At one point, Afro-American was. So again, I go with the flow. I try to go with it. It's now the New York Times and several other journalistic endeavors have begun to capitalize black.
Yes, I've been doing it for a long time, actually.
So I'm trying to follow suit. The other thing that one of the
I capitalized brown as well, by the way.
Well, I'm about to get to that, but let me say the other thing too is if we don't capitalize white, my question is, and it was brought up by an African American studies professor in Texas that I read. He said, if we don't capitalize W in white, are we not perhaps giving that term to just the neo-Nazis and just the people who are spreading hate? So, that's something to think about. I'm not going to ask you to make a comment on that, but I'm just saying.
I think that the problem is that the capital exists already, because we're living in an empire that has been completely involved. If you look at my page, it says whenever my Facebook page, whenever it says what you do, right? So I say, speak true to the perverse power of the United States of amnesia.
Yes.
That's what I do.
Yeah. All right. So that brings us up to the question. more and more times now, I'm hearing people talk about black and brown people, black and brown. And so the question, I'm used to the term black. I'm hearing more and more the term brown. I'm not sure whether or not, is that something that is universally accepted? Are there areas where, in either Latin America or perhaps elsewhere where Spanish is a predominant language? And of course, when I say Latin America, I'm also tending to include Brazil, where they don't speak Spanish. They speak, obviously, Portuguese. So, my question is this an acceptable term? Is this a term that everyone wants? Or is this a term that's being imposed on people just for sake of not having a proper definition?
These are USA terms. Let's make sure we understand that it's the USA that created the construct of race, which is actually a totally abstract, but it was created as a construct to actually codify people. And the Spanish began doing that as well. In fact, the Spanish were really meticulous in combining words to come up with moreno. I'm a mestizo, meaning that I am part of the progeny of the Spanish conquest, and indigenous. I'm also Quechua native from Ecuador, but I'm also a hybrid because Tama is actually a German name. My mother's great-grandfather was the old man Tama, and he left from Bavaria. That's a Bavarian name. He arrived in Ecuador at the turn of the 1900s. So most Latin Americans are like myself. We're a combination, we're mestizos, some of us, not all, of indigenous and European. So you're hearing the term black, brown, and indigenous people because, as we know, the biggest looters, they talk. I'm writing an article because there's so much that we're hearing about looters, but the biggest looters, we're in the land, the belly of the beast of some of the biggest looters. Look, in 1620, at the end in December, it'll be 400 years since the first looters arrived, the Plymouth Rock, the Pilgrims. And I always say, if the Pilgrims arrived without papers, why were they not deported, right? So let's make sure that we understand that the biggest looters are, this country. Looted the Native American people, the indigenous people, looted everywhere as an imperial posturing. And look at the mentality of the Pilgrims. If you read Howard Zinn's, the people's history, the Pilgrims actually were being taught to cultivate the land by the indigenous people of the northern tribes in that Plymouth Rock area, and I forget exactly what tribes they were, but they taught them, and therefore those Pilgrims were already plotting on how to kill them and loot the land.
There were two people who were actually responsible for the Pilgrims surviving the first winter, and if you don't know about it, you probably do. I'm going to remind you again, and that was Squanto, and another one. They were actually taken by the British and brought to the old world, as it were. They were trained in English and then brought over back to where the Pilgrims were essentially, and they learned English as a result of the Spanish, I believe it was, who'd actually captured them, and they learned English, and so when the English came over, the Pilgrims came to what we now know as Provincetown, Plymouth Rock, as it were. They were saved by those two individuals, and of course, as you know, as you don't know that about Squanto, if you don't know, also it's a very long tale. You need to look that tale up because it really is a story of an indigenous person who helped save the squatters, as it were, who we revere as the Pilgrims. Who were fleeing England. And just another thing, just so you'll know, the Pilgrims were part of a larger movement, as you probably know, the Puritans, who essentially shut down English theater back in the mid 17th century. So they're not exactly theater critics' favorite group.
But what I love, and I often say this, at least here in the Catholic slave port city, because let's not forget that the church was very much supported. They were Catholic, French, and Spanish, and the church was very much supportive of the enslavement. But at least we escaped the puritanical tentacles in the Crescent City in New Orleans.
All right, let me bring in our next guest because I want to bring in a little bit of the distaff side now to talk about some of the issues facing the ladies who are of this particular community. And I hope that she's not in mid-chew because she's probably going to have a swallow of something delicious right now she's going to bring in. But let's bring in right now Jen Pagan, Jennifer Pagan, in mid-mouthful. There she is.
No, I am about to take a huge sip of my Pisco Sour.
Very nice.
Sour. And I'm drinking this because the piece that I've been working on is from Chile. They do this pisco sour in Chile, and they do this pisco sour in Peru as well. And one of my bucket list things is to go on a hike in Peru. So, salud.
So salud. Now, Jen, you're from originally where?
I'm from New Orleans, but my father is from Honduras.
Okay. So as a result,
Honduranian.
Yes, I as Jose and I like to joke around about stuff that I am Honduranian. My family is Mediterranean. I'm also a little Choctaw Indian. My great grandmother was full Choctaw Indian. One of my great grandmothers. But my family, my father is from Honduras, and on the other side, my family is from Spain and Tunisia, Sicily.
So you have a real melting pot within your family, don't you?
Well, I don't know that I would call it a melting pot. Is more than like a melange. Because when you look at the tradition of the melting pot, which the work that I do as my day job is to one of the things we do is we do some anti-racism trainings, and I've learned so much about where the melting pot came from. And it actually came from a play on Broadway, and they wanted to just sort of homogenize everyone. And when you think about American culture, what American culture is it's homogenized.
Assimilation, right? That's what
assimilation,
you're
but also homogenization. Yeah. And I know that growing up, my mother didn't want me to speak Spanish because she didn't speak Spanish, so it made her uncomfortable. And when I would spend time with my grandmother, we only spoke Spanish. And I'm probably one out of like 30 cousins, and I have like 4 other cousins that speak Spanish because it's a very complicated thing. But the assimilation, you would never know that my father had this accent, right? And but when my grandmother was alive, it was the most, to me, I just identified with her so much. And that thing, and the fact that we have Honduras, outside of Honduras, New Orleans has the largest Honduras population in the world.
Right, I know that. Yeah.
That there's more Hondurans here than the capital of Tegucigalpa.
See, and my great grandfather, who was a Pineda, and last name Pineda, worked for the United Fruit Company. He was some sort of.
That's blood money. Let's make sure we understand.
No, I know that it's blood money, but he worked in Nicaragua and in Honduras, and he ran the businesses there. But then my grandmother married a merchant marine, and that's how they ended up here. And
in truth, just so that everybody knows and understands, Samuel Zemurray, who ran the United Fruit Company, was a member of the Jewish community here in New Orleans. Donated that big house on St. Charles Avenue to the president of Tulane. And I know was guilty of a lot of things, but again, was like many other people of his generation, trying to make a fortune, and the rags to riches story, and he did.
The United Fruit Company has so much blood on their hands. You should look at a documentary called Blood Fruit.
Yeah, I'm familiar with a lot of the reprehensible things that were done at his behest. Yeah, now, when you say the United Fruit Company, though, you gotta take off what was happening in the company and what the company did, as opposed to what individuals did.
The United Fruit Company literally ran dictatorships from New Orleans.
Well, they created a few dictatorships, I believe. Yes, I'm not sure that they ran them necessarily.
And I want to make sure that we understand that America, there is no America. Okay, that's a construct. I am Latin American, South American, raised in North America. I'm more American than most people. The construct of America, and I always say in my own shows, we have to take hostage the moniker of America as being held, sequestered by the United States as all that in good and noble, because we know that the United States of North America does not live up to its press release. And right now we're having another moment of racial reckoning. Right?
Let me ask a question of Jen, though, before we go on. Jen, you heard what I was discussing with Jose earlier, relating to the use of the term brown for the Latin community, or what he said was not a good term to use Hispanic community. So you agree that that's proper, that we should use brown to describe the members of the Latin community?
Well, it's really complicated because members of the Latin community are not, I don't think, are all brown. Like Jose was talking about, is you have a lot of mixed people. And when you go into, there's a lot of mestizo, as he was talking about. There's a lot of mixture, right? And you can say brown. Some people that I know that grew up in Argentina are actually of Italian descent, right? But they went, they emigrated over to South America, and that's where they are. In my own family, I mean, you might say that I was brown. You might not. You might say that I wasn't. I mean, I've run into casting issues where they say, "Well, you're not Latina enough," and I said, "Well, I'm actually pretty Latina. You know, I'm pretty Latina. I mean, I'm Honduran, but you know, when I lived in LA, I was completely embraced as a Latina." I think that the Latinx term is a very interesting term because it's a gender neutral term, right? To describe people not Latina or Latino, but it's all inclusive. Latinx.
Is it a term only for the Caribbean and Central America, or is it for a term for everyone? I wonder about that because I've read
most people,
different things.
For me, Latin American is much wider and much more inclusive. Brown, I use brown in relationship to but the immigrant people that I work with, they don't see themselves as Latinx. That's much more of a, I feel like sometimes it's a collegiate imposition. I use it as little as I can. I like its idea, but there's no immigrant that I work with that calls themselves Latinx. The real people, la gente del Congreso of the immigrant, you know, Latinx is more of a term within the arts ecosphere, within the collegiate ecosphere. Mm-hmm. All these different terms have their particular parameters and their particular problems as well. So the same thing with, for example, I was just called Spick when I was growing up. Right? Because that's what I was. And that's the derogatory term used against Latinos, the same way PR was being used against Puerto Ricans, because I grew up in the Northeast, so I became an honorary Puerto Rican. The same way even the term Mexican is often used in a derogatory manner, right? And right now, no human being is illegal. You know, this illegal aliens, and first of all, just the entire construct here has always been about codifying different people just to actually raise white power. So that's why I get back to this idea of, I don't like the idea of capitalizing W. You know, it's
capitalizing what?
W for white. You know,
capitalizing W for white.
Yeah, I mean that's already. I mean, we're living it. It's already understood. Everyone else. I say that everyone else in this country is defined from the Eurocentric white power centrics. There, from there, everyone else is defined.
But I think Latinx has come from the young people. You know, you have a
Generation X, basically, with Latin.
Well, I'm Generation X, and I wouldn't say it's Generation X. I'd say it's more millennial, and I think it's Generation Y, maybe. But it's more the thing to live in a non-binary world, because in the Spanish language, you have male and female terms, right? Male and female, Latino, Latina. And it was interesting because I had to look up Latinx to see what it meant, because I always went by Latina. But when you have Latino, it includes male and female, right? The masculine.
The O is masculine and
includes both. Okay. However, you wouldn't say Latinas, and that would include Jose and I. We would say Latinos, right? That would include the two of us. So I think Latinx has come out of that movement where you want to be sort of gender neutral, right? So Latin.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah.
I understand that, absolutely. And it is, but it's a lot of young people, and before actually, Jen, people were using Latin and the at, Latina, that was being embraced as well. Right? Like Latina for all of us, because yes, Latino and being very male has encompassed all of us, right? So I understand these aspects, but what I was saying in relationship to the immigrant reconstruction workers, I don't believe they see themselves as Latinx. In fact, some of them are actually—
No, they don't, because it's a class. It's also a class thing.
That's right.
It's a classic. It's an intellectual class thing.
That's right.
So that when you have people that are working and that have come here to work, the ornaleros, I remember someone saying to me, I was so offended. I said, I need to get some work done on my house. And someone said, just go to Home Depot and buy yourself a Mexican.
Yeah.
And I just had to say, what?
Yeah, that's been very common here. Get yourself a Mexican. And most of the workers are Honduran.
Exactly.
Workers are
Guatemalan, Nicaraguan,
Right.
Salvadorian, yeah, Peruvian even. And then we've had a whole faction of Brazilian people brought in who actually rebuilt the Superdome. So one of the things that I'm doing right now, Alan, is every anniversary I try to make sure that our people are remembered, because there are forces at work, like this book right here, published by the almighty Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, and I called them the Louisiana Endowment for the Inhumanities, who have totally disappeared our people as if we did not exist. They have a post-Katrina chapter called Renewal. Do you think there's anything in there, Alan, about immigrants and Reconstruction?
I'll bet you not.
Nothing. There's one sentence early on, scripted by Brian Doyle, who I know as the previous one of the previous commanders over there, and he says it in the early chapters. He's one of the executive publishers, and he says, "Oh yes, some immigrants came here and helped to reconstruct, along with a lot of young people." So this book right now is being challenged right now in the court of public opinion, and I've created a lot of work. I actually, when I perform at Taco Truck Theater, I bring the book out. I'm about to unleash another video, the short film that I just put up, called Hard Living in the Big Easy, Immigrants and the Rebirth of New Orleans. And that's actually the book that's forthcoming. I've been behind because right now you can't have a more tragic metaphor for all of you out there than the fact that we still have the body of Jose Ponce Arreola, a Mexican 63-year-old immigrant buried in the rubble of the Hard Rock Cafe. So this book tries to bury us in history the way we are buried in the rubble of the Hard Rock Cafe. And just the other day, they finally pulled out the body of
Quignon.
Kimberly. And imagine that. And this is what some of the Black and Brown coalitions, the activists, have been saying. Look at that. That couldn't be a more tragic metaphor for this town, the way it treats its Black and Brown people. They were buried in the rubble since October 12th. I believe, and a lot of folks do, that if they would have been white bodies in there, they would have gotten them out much earlier, no matter what complications.
There's no excuse for leaving anybody inside a ruin for 303 days. And we just need to move on. Now, Jose, you're wearing your normal costume. I don't know, is it the costume de guerre? Is that what we call it? That's the proper term, don't you think? But I mean, I captured this image of you at Le Petit Theater when you were performing a few years back with Michael McKelvey. But it seems like that's your major. And now, what is the point of the fronds, the palm fronds there?
Oh, those are very sacred. Those are like palm leaves. They're actually very much like what you would see on Palm Sunday. And in Latin America as traditions, as son palmas, no? They are made out of palm leaves, and they're called the achacapas, and they're actually used in traditions of indigenous rituals.
Let me tell you, the only Palm Sunday I'm familiar with was when my parents went to Jewish camp to pick me up, and there were the counselors saying it's Palm Sunday. That's basically... Tell me about, Jen, some of the stuff that you're doing. I know that I saw a wonderful production, not necessarily for the young, but for those of us who are a little bit more adult-natured. This was called Eat Me, I believe, right?
Come me.
Yes, and it was I mean, it was interesting because it had to do with you actually mixed food on stage as you talked and did your monologue. And then you fed the audience, which I thought was, I mean, that I know Gabrielle Reisman did that in Taste a few years ago, but it's such a wonderful
hook. This show
hook.
is completely different from Gabby's show because Gabby's show was fantastic. Loved the show. When I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this is so great. This show came about because Kathy Randolph had said, you need to cook on stage. And the one thing that I am grateful to my grandmother for, mi abuelita, is that she taught me how to cook, right? And and she gave me this sort of, I don't know, there's this magical realism in Spanish literature and Spanish theater. And I'm very fond of Isabel Allende, who's from Chile. And there was just this thing, and I had all of this stuff to say about food and about sex and about how it intersects. And the way that I have been sexualized my whole life, by other people, particularly men, was a way for me to explore that. And to me, food is love because my grandmother, mi abuelita, always had food for anybody that was around. Like she was, you would go to her house and there were frijoles always in the warmer. She would make lechon and she would make this insane sopa de pollo con yuca. It just, the stuff that she would make makes my whole being just kind of like, it just makes it on fire, right? Like when there's certain smells and things. And it's a very similar thing. The same things happen in your brain when you have sexual desire, right? There are all these things that happen. And so I wanted to do a show that paid homage to the sensuality that I feel is lost sometimes in American culture. And the way that, because I honestly feel that growing up in New Orleans gave me this really wonderful playing field to just absorb all of these sights and sounds and colors and tastes and the music and the food. And my grandmother was a part of that, right? My grandmother was a part of this thing. And I don't know, it was a really fun show to do. It was a really,
it was really excellent. I mean, of the Fringe Festival things that we saw, that was part of Infringe, was it?
Infringe.
Yeah, with John Broder runs. And again, I thought it was really excellent. Over at Southern Rep, and it was done late at night. But I think you did a very good box office for that show too, didn't you?
I did an excellent box office, considering that it was at 11 o'clock at night on some weeknights. But, you know, we had an almost sold out house on Sunday night, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
And it was a great show. And I was really hoping to bring it back after, you know, sometime in April, May, but
right, we know.
That did not work out.
Before I get back to Jose, I did want to mention something you touched on just briefly. You lived in Los Angeles for a while, and you were in the acting community there, and you would be hired quite often, you said, as a Latina, correct? Mm-hmm. And yet, when you'd come to New Orleans, the pushback was you didn't look Latin enough. Was that correct?
That is correct. It's been interesting. I've had the experience of going on an audition where, you know, they asked for a person of color and saying, well, you know, I'm going to embrace this thing, and told that, you know, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. I have auditioned for a Latina part, and it went to someone from out of town. I have seen parts for a Latina go to white actresses who basically it was a caricature of what a Latin person would be. And that this one production, when I went in, these people were supposed to grow up in the same neighborhood. They were all supposed to be of the same ethnic origin, of the same Latin ethnic origin, but everyone had such diverse, it drove me crazy, because I know that in certain languages or in certain countries, certain words mean different things, right? And there was so dramaturgically, I didn't feel like the show really sort of stepped up to the plate. Mm-hmm. And that's hard, you know. And I don't know, Jose, if you remember when they had the Cervantes School.
I remember when I had the Cervantes School. I never made it out there.
So they did fabulous shows in Spanish, right? Mm-hmm. And they did these beautiful shows. And a lot of the audience was out of Kenner and Metairie, because a lot of Latin people live out there. But it was wonderful. And I remember working on a Tennessee Williams show, and they needed some Latin actors. And it's just, I think, the way that they treated them, because I was in the show and I wasn't playing, I was just playing a girl in a Tennessee Williams show. But they brought these Latin actors in for the Night of the Iguana. And it was really interesting to see how they treated them. You know, they treated them differently.
You mean detrimentally, like not with as much respect, or how different?
You know, it's a thing where it's almost like if you have an accent and English isn't your first language, they treat you almost like you're not as smart.
Oh, okay.
You don't have as much knowledge. You don't have as much talent. That's what I found. And it was really heartbreaking to me. And I said something to the director. I was very young. I was probably like 25. But I said something to the director. I said, these guys are amazing. They're amazing actors. You need to not talk to them that way. And I've always been outspoken about it.
But you're saying that took place at Cervantes School?
No, 2 actors from Cervantes School came to be a part of a production of the Tennessee Williams Festival with Night of the Iguana.
Right. Yeah.
And they treated them like that. Yeah.
So let me just ask a question. Moving forward now, after all that's happened with the protests, everything that we've undergone, is it now a given that any future Latinx roles, or whatever we want to term them as, should only go to members of the Latin community, the Latinx community? Is it anathema now to suggest that any actors from the white class, whatever you want to call them, that they should sort of move to the side and let some of the other actors come in who are more representative of that community?
They should not put on brown face. And that is a big problem.
Yeah.
Big problem. If you were in LA, the thing is that we don't have enough power. Let's make sure we understand we have cultural power. And I don't believe for 1 minute that the white wokeness moment, especially the theater community here in New Orleans, one of the most deeply segregated theater communities, you come out and see my shows for the Taco Truck Theater. We have a non-binary African-American cellist performer, brilliant poet performer. You have trans people, you have black, brown, you have immigrant people that come see my show. You have white people that come see my work. The segregated community here is so deep. And when they do have the African-American community, it's a few people of color, right? Like Le Petit Theater, straight up, come on. Are they going to change their ways? I don't think so. And if Mr. Williams is listening to this, talk to me. When I performed, remember when I threw down those 7-10 minutes at the at Le Petit Theater for the fundraiser for the festival? I blew them away. Barbara Motley came after. I've known came after me and came afterwards and talked to me after the show. And she said, "Wow, Jose, you were brilliant, but you hit us hard." I said, "Of course, I will make you laugh and hit you hard."
Right.
Because they
you do that.
Other thing, but 1 second, Alan, that you said, should roles go to only Latin actors? I would say this, as a performer, I think that if you do your dramaturgy, that if there is not a Latin actor, if there's no one that comes to the audition and there isn't someone, as long as you have, a good vocal coach, as long as you have the dramaturgy that is rigorous dramaturgy, that you can play that character because you are an actor and you do come into that. I was in a show with the company is no longer here, but we did a show by Jose Rivera, Marisol, which is about the Puerto Rican experience in New York, the Puerto Riqueño. And basically what's happening in the show is that Marisol is whitewashing herself to fit into this uptown publishing world. She's losing her Puerto Ricanness, right? And in New York, to be Puerto Rican, New York is a whole other thing. So when you have your icons, you have your religious icons down here, and you're lighting candles and you're losing that. The dramaturgy in that show was lost. We had a white female director. She was she's a fantastic director, but we had a lot of conversations about that. We had a lot of conversations about
playing Puerto Rican.
What's that?
It was a Chicana playing a Puerto Rican.
And it wasn't Chicana playing a Puerto Rican, but that didn't bother. Like, that wasn't the issue. The issue was, had the dramaturgy been done with fidelity, had it been done to follow, what does it mean to be Puerto Rican in New York? What does it mean to lose that part of yourself, to assimilate, so that when I go home, my life is different? And there's a struggle. There's this internal struggle that's going on, and it's apocalyptic. And the show is apocalyptic, right? The show is apocalyptic because inside what's happening is apocalyptic, as in you're losing part of who you are. And that happens so often. It happens so often to so many people who come here as immigrants, or who come here and their family's is an immigrant. You're a first generation of something. It is apocalyptic what happens inside of you to lose that part of yourself. And what are you left with? You're left with a strip mall. You're left with what? McDonald's and Burger King and Bed Bath & Beyond, right?
Gringolandia. You're left with Gringolandia psychosis. So I think I am not in the agreement of having, as dramaturgically as they may be, having white actors do brown face or playing Latino characters. We have look at what happened with if you remember My Little Friend, right? Or if you remember the De Palma movie of
Brian De Palma when he had
Yeah, when he had the most ridiculous
Al Pacino
accent by Al Pacino. Al Pacino,
Right.
no, I'm Tony Montana.
Right. Yeah.
Tony Montana, I'm here to kill you all.
Right.
Tony, he didn't even know how to play a Cuban accent. He was
It was a Cuban accident. You're right. I think you're right.
Let me tell you something, Jose. They cast me to play a Cuban woman in Rob Florence's play Bones. And I remember sweating to get the accent right because there's a certain rhythmic.
The Cuban people speak like they got something.
Right.
No, the Cuban people, and Cuba se habla así.
Cuba, right.
The Cuban people, they got
I
something in the mouth.
sweating because I'm, part Honduran, which is a different accent. And I went to a Cuban friend and I practiced and practiced. And my Cuban friend came and they said, you did a great job. But the thing is that I knew that I couldn't go out there with my school Spanish, right? My Castilian Spanish and pull off this Cuban character.
Right.
And I was able to do my monologue in Spanish and I was very proud of myself. And it was a challenge as an actor. But what I was true to was the fact that there is a certain, there's a certain tempo to the speech. There is a certain rhythm, and there's just something about this woman that is different from my grandmother. However, it's similar, right? So I felt I was nervous to do it, but I felt like as a performer, it really pushed me to do something beyond.
Yeah, your grandmother's one of the figures that you've got in here, right? When you did Shoebox?
Yes, my grandmother is right. The second one from is that the left?
It would be the left.
Second one from the left, yes.
The one not holding the shoebox, yes.
yes. In the pink.
So, and you said one of them is the two on the ends are men that you're portraying. One was a shoe cobbler, if you will.
A shoe cobbler.
And the other was an Italian of some sort, you mentioned?
My Sicilian-Tunisian grandfather.
Sicilian-Tunisian, okay.
Oh, and he was also Spanish, because his father was from Cadiz, Spain.
So that you did a few years ago at that time was the Shoebox, was at the Shadow Box, right?
Was at the Shadow Box. It was at Le Chat. It was in the Fringe Festival. I've done it in New York. I've done it in Chicago. I've done it in LA. Yeah. I developed it in Los Angeles. Yeah. But that show was really a lot of what my grandmother, mi abuelita gave me, because the show opens with her singing this song that she used to dance around, Virgen de medianoche, Virgen tú eres tú, a la protectora es tu manto de azul. She would sing this song constantly doing the show. Oh, baby, I got to reduce, meaning she had to lose weight. So she would do these aerobics to Daniel Santos, to Julio Iglesias, to all these crazy Latin crooners. And she would try and get us to work out with her. She was adorable. And so that was really an homage to her.
This is also from that same Shoebox Lounge. I'm not quite sure this was at the theater at St. Claude. I guess that was back in the day, not that long ago. But now, by the way, I should remind anybody, if anybody has a question or a comment about tonight, please go on StreamYard.com/Facebook and give them permission to use your name. That way we'll know who you are. And Jose, we had a couple of things. I'm going to be showing a video of you performing with your kids. This is actually them as well. This was the a winner actually of the Best Louisiana Feature, won an award at the New Orleans Film Festival. And those are your two children. And this film just was available for viewing this past week. I believe it still may be available as a documentary on all that you do, but I believe it still may be available by invitation only now, right?
Yes, we still have the film. We had it available for free viewing since actually June. So June, it might have been actually May. It's since the pandemic, May, June, no, not since March, but I think it was May, June, July, and we just finished August 9th.
And it's fantastic.
We're going to show a little bit of that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is actually, tell me a little bit about this. This is part of the
Heidi Hickman. That's Heidi Hickman, the amazing. She brings I bring the taco. I bring the truck in the theater. She brings the tacos. Amazing. She even cooks up vegan tacos. She's our amazing cook that's been part of the project because actually it's radical outdoor dinner theater. You see it, and what the clip they're going to use is a clip from the Ashe Cultural Arts Center where you see the actual truck, the stage,
Right.
and if you would have seen our audiences, very diverse, immigrants, children actually, because and when children see children performing, it's amazing. My boys in the film are frozen in time. We were just watching a clip of it. They're 10 and they're 7 at the time, and they're masked, and they each created their own persona.
This was what, 3 years ago that you you filmed it? Okay.
They have been singing with the children's opera because their mama, Claudia, their mama has been with the opera chorus for numerous years, so they wound up being with the opera chorus. And my little one, he was the one that got accepted to the opera chorus at the age of 5. Because he's so sharp, and because they speak Spanish, they understood all the Italians. So they've done a number of Puccini operas, and
his kids are amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we're going to see him in just a little bit. I
the
wanted
thing
to find
that I
out
love about Jose is that he has passed on the language to his children.
Well,
He has
that's great.
passed on the language. To his
They are bilingual. They speak English and Spanish well. Now, tell me a little bit about some of the other performers before I go on. I know you wanted to tell me about them.
Yes, Spirit McIntyre, amazing cellist, African-American, non-binary poet, performer. Where I am the catalyst, Spirit is the spiritual guide. And when we perform one of their songs, Somebody Call My Name, that was inspired as a creative response to the murder of Sandra Bland. And we also have people call out the names of all that have been slaughtered. And we've been doing that for some time now. It's one of the most moving rituals. And then I think you also have an image there of Natalie Jones, La Sirena, singer, speaks Spanish like an Argentinian, totally, completely bilingual, because she lived some time and she's actually there in Spain right now. But she writes a personal piece, addressing the challenge of having her father vote for the chump while her brother is gay and her mother. So it really threw her, and it was really a beautiful personal piece.
Right, she's got a lot to say. But again, as you mentioned, these are just some of the people. I know that you also in the piece have somebody else doing some drumming. I don't know.
That's Michael Ward Bergman. We also have in previous shows we've had also the musician Roberto Carrillo playing the panpipes. In the video that you're about to see, Roberto, I don't think Roberto was with us. The two musicians there were Spirit and Michael Ward Bergman, who's an amazing multi-instrumentalist.
All right, we're going to try to get it started if we can. Let me see if I can share this out correctly and make sure we get this out. And just give me a second here. All right, let's see if this goes.
It's so cute. The show. Get out.
You have the sound?
Hold on a second.
So cute. Oh, those are his kids.
Yeah, let me get the sound on. I'm sorry. That's my fault for trying to go fast.
Get the sound because they are absolutely adorable.
Here we go.
Amazing.
Here we go.
Fantastico.
Bring it back. You got to bring it back a little bit.
Very nice. There you go. All right, that's fantastic. Let me.
When they sang "No Human Beings Legal" in Spanish and English, people lost their minds. People literally lost their minds. We had shows where we had, that one was about outside. We had about 100 people at the Ashe Cultural Arts Center, and you could see the truck. And right behind me is Mwende Kawiwa, an incredible poet. We've had different poets come on as guests with us for quite some time. We had a variety of performers. Now the Taco Truck Theater, the touring trio now includes a previous performer that used to be with us, Jose Fermin Ceballos, an amazing singer. But there is one of the shows that was captured by Carlos Valladares, and you see the truck and you see the stage and you see people out there, and they're eating and they're watching this radical dinner theater at the Ashe Cultural Center parking lot.
And no guacamole, right? For anybody who...
No
guacamole for immigrant haters.
We sell these shirts like hot tamales.
I can well imagine. Now, by the way, we haven't gotten any comments yet, but somebody still, if they want to get a comment in, they just go on Facebook if they're watching and just make a comment. But it's advisable to go to StreamYard.com/Facebook to make sure that they get permission to use their name. And, you can do that. Before we're getting towards the end of the evening now, but I wanted to get back to Jen real quick. I know I've got a few things of yours that we had aside from obviously the shoebox. There were a couple of pieces that you had here of some of the works here. This is a black and white, and I know you said it's in color. What is this from? Is this from a particular? So
this is an amazing thing that Jose did, and he included me in. Amazing thing.
Tell me about it.
It was Sin Fronteras, yeah, right, Jose?
Teatro Sin Fronteras.
Teatro Sin Fronteras. And this was where Jose brought together Latin American artists, not just theater artists, but just artists in general, right? All of these artists. And he had a grant from NPN, was it?
No, the Alternate Roots organization.
Alternate Roots. I'm sorry. Yeah, Alternate Roots. And he did these monthly series where he would present artists, whether they were musical artists, visual artists, and theater artists. And he would bring you together. So this is a piece I started to do after Katrina. It's based on the Arpilera movement in Chile after Pinochet came into power. And it is about a woman who comes to live in the States after, I don't know if people are familiar with Ariel Dorfman and Death and the Maiden, but this piece is about a woman who's losing her daughter to the United States, right? She's losing her daughter. She is, her daughter is assimilating, and it is the immigrant experience. So it's partly based on a woman that I knew from Chile who went through the Arpilera movement and came to the States from Chile, and on my grandmother and some of her experiences. And to me, it was mostly about that experience of how do you hold two places? How do you hold these two places? The old place and the new place, particularly when the U.S. has gone into the old place, your country, and they have engineered a war. They have engineered a coup.
Or dictatorships.
They've engineered these things that have ripped your society apart, your family, just everything. They've ripped it apart. And so this is about that woman, and it's a woman's experience. It's a woman and her daughter. It is her experience and how she feels about losing her daughter to the American dream. But she also wants to become a U.S. citizen. And that was that about. And Jose gave me the opportunity to sort of like flesh that out more. And I first did that piece for Vita the 10th after Katrina in 2008, when Eve Ensler came here for the 10th anniversary of the Vagina Monologues, and I did it in the Superdome. We did a show called Women in War. What are you at war with yourself? And at that time, I had been at war inside of me. There was this war going on about my identity. Who am I really, right? Uh-huh. I had been living in LA and been accepted as a Latina. And then I came back to New Orleans, and I was this New Orleanian that no one really recognized who I was as a Latina. And there's always been this war about who am I really? What is my identity? I am all these things, right? And so that's how that piece came about. And those are two things that spoke to me. So as an artist, I thought this is an amazing, amazing piece, but it's also about mothers and daughters. It's about mothers and daughters, but it's really about the immigrant experience, about coming to the land of the free, but not ever feeling free.
Right. I know you had one of the piece before, and I think this is Francine Siegel in the center there, and of course that's Diana Shortez, one of our great actors here in this community as well. What is this from? Do you remember what this is from?
So this is actually after we developed the piece called Women in War. Diana and I engaged Francine for this show called Naked in a New World. And each of these women have come from someplace else into America. Diana, obviously, was the Baroness
Pontalba, right?
Yeah. Francine was a Sephardic Jew, and her family came here and settled down, which I have these Sephardic Jewish roots somewhere deep into my lineage from North Africa. And so we did this piece, and it was Naked in the New World. It's about being stripped of who you are and how do you then make it in the world. And so that was our piece that we did. And it was 3 monologues with some interaction between us. It was a beautiful show.
We're getting really to the end of the show real quick. And I did want to mention, Jose, thank you very much for being here. Jen, too. Moving forward, I wanted to kind of get you both to comment. Where are we and where should we be? What can we do to advance the cause for the Latinx community here in New Orleans, in the theater community specifically? How can we advance their cause?
I want to make one note before getting to that. Rodrigo Dorfman is actually the filmmaker and the son of Ariel Dorfman, by the way, Jen.
Okay.
So Rodrigo Dorfman directed the film, and I know Ariel personally. In fact, the night we won the award, we called Ariel. I've known Ariel since 1995, right?
There's a reason you are mi hermano.
Okay.
Death and the Maiden is the one play that gets played everywhere across the universe.
Yes.
All right. So, now answer the question.
All right, answer the question.
Well, the question, I think, in relationship to this moment, I don't trust the white wokeness moment right now. If you've needed all these bodies, black bodies dying at the doorstep to your consciousness, finally woke up, it's a beginning, but I don't think for a minute it's going to change.
I'm not saying they're fully woke. Maybe they're just partially woke,
Yeah, maybe some of them may feel they're in a bad dream because they're being held accountable.
Right.
I think this is the beginning of a moment, but I don't think it's going to solve anything on a larger level. I want them to put their money where their liberal mouths are.
Okay. Well, what about their money where their conservative mouths are?
Well, most of the theater people in the theater world, they consider themselves liberals, and yes. Barbara Motley actually told me, Jose, you heard us. I said, well, you needed to hear what I told you, because maybe in that audience, and some people told me, you got a lot of Republicans in there. Good. And some people have asked me, have you ever received an invitation? What about presenting it to the Republican audience? I said, I'm waiting for the Republican committee to reach out to me to invite me. And I'll perform it for them. But just the concepts. And I remember Barbara being a little bit uncomfortable with me. I said, Barbara, you needed to, I did everything you needed to hear. I made you laugh and I made you think, and that's important. But I don't think that the movement is really going to last within the theater world. I think like everything else, Trayvon Martin died. I do a lot of the work.
But Trayvon Martin, again, and I want Jen to answer this before, Trayvon Martin was killed by somebody who identified partially as a member of the Hispanic community.
George Zimmerman, yes.
Yeah, right. So again, that must be very, very off-putting to somebody who's trying to push for rights too.
Well, I think that the biggest problem that we have within the Eurocentric plantation is exactly that. It still works like a plantation, especially in this town. I hope it's a beginning going in the right direction. I'm not for 1 minute convinced that it's really going to change anything.
Jen, let me let you get the last word.
The last word. I would say that just like if I were an artistic director of a theater company where I was presenting work, if I were going to do some Latin playwrights, that I would seek to reach out to the Latin community. Southern Rep did a beautiful show from a Cuban woman. It was out of the LA Women's Theater Festival. It was about being Cuban and growing up, and it was just
beautiful. Christina,
oh my God, it was phenomenal, right? Yeah. And I think that, you know, I was part of a show by it was I can't remember the name of it. I think I've had 3 pisco sours, so please forgive me. But I did a show with a company here of all women, and it was fantastic. But it was Lorca. Thank you. I'm a little drunk right now. I'm sorry. Right. It was Lorca. Anyway, Lorca. But, you know, it's like if you're going to do a show like that, I would say really reach out to actors in this community, because you do have a lot of Latin actors out here. And to bring them into the fold, just as you would with African-American actors, to just extend the invitation. Whenever I do a show, I invite all of my Latino relatives, and they bring people. And what they're most appreciative of is the fact that they can hear their language a little bit. And even though I do it bilingually a lot, it's more English than Spanish, they really appreciate it, right? They really appreciate it. And when I moved back after Katrina, I made a specific point when I was doing our children's show with Claudia Baumgarten, another absolutely fabulous performer in town.
We were doing with you tonight.
She's here with me tonight. We had dinner. We had pescado. I found a need, and I saw these kids that were really scared in these schools that we were going to and performing for. So we incorporated some Spanish stories. And when they heard their language, their eyes just like, they were like, oh, I'm a part of this, right? So I would just say, open your arms, reach out to Latin performers. And if you want to do a Latin show, do the dramaturgy, bring in some Latin performers, and really, I don't know, just do it justice.
We're out of time. The only people in Taco Theater is the only bilingual show in this city.
Next time we are going to talk about Francisco Lorca and the concept of duende. Duende.
It's Federico.
I want to know about what that means. I don't know what it means exactly, because it translates into elf, and I'm not sure that is the exact term that you all want.
But I do want Federico Garcia Lorca.
Yeah, Federico Garcia Lorca. I want to talk, but we're out of time. I have to be, cognizant of the fact that we're only an hour-long shows. Thank you very much. Again, I've got to run. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, Jen Pagan and Jose Torres-Tama. Thank you very much. We will take care of all that we need to do right now by saying goodnight, reminding everybody that for the next couple of Friday nights, we're going to have a fantastic show dealing with Louis Armstrong. This Friday night is Joe Morell's play, the playwright. She's going to talk about Lil and Satchmo, a play about Lil Hardin, but very much about Louis Armstrong. And then the following Friday, 2 Fridays from now, we're going to have a very special presentation with a musical that was written about Louis Armstrong's life that has not been revealed even to Ricky Riccardi, the curator of the Louis Armstrong House in Queens. By the way, the curator of the Louis Armstrong House in Queens, Ricky Riccardi, will be with us for 2 Fridays coming up this Friday and the following Friday. Do not miss it. Thank you very much for being again with us tonight on NOLA Theater Talk. My name is Alan Smason. Thank you very much for being with us. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you at the theater.